Good morning. How are you all doing? Um, I'm hoping that you've all settled into a routine and you're getting used to this working from home and school from home, remote learning thing. It's been an adjustment for me. As you guys all know, I really struggled with trying to get our classes up online, and it was a real learning curve to figure out how to make this all work. And as I've told you before, I certainly don't have it all figured out. So please, please, please help me. Give me feedback and let me know how we can do it better, what you guys need, because I know it's a lot right now. So today we're going to this is our second lesson, and we're going to work on knife skills. So I know a lot of you think that you have it figured out. Some of you who have done my class, you probably do have it figured out, but practice makes perfect. And with all of this, we have been given this gift of a little bit of extra time so we can all practice and perfect some of the things that we really want to excel at. So you heard that beeping. That's our oven all warmed up and ready to go for our recipe today. That's exciting. So we're going to work on our knife skills. I'm going to teach you guys the proper way to hold a knife, some knife safety. So last week we talked about safety and kitchen safety, how to make sure that everyone is healthy and safe with all of the food that you're preparing them. And that goes with knife as well. A lot of dangerous things can happen in a kitchen with a sharp knife. So we want you all to be safe and not have any emergencies that are unnecessary. So if you follow along with this and you're paying attention, and when you're focusing on your cooking, hopefully we can avoid all that. So that's one thing that we're going to do today. And while we're practicing our knife skills, obviously we're going to be cutting things, so why not put it to good use? So we're going to learn some different cuts, and then we're going to cook it up. We're going to make some roasted veggies. So let's get started. Remember, first thing you have to do when you get in the kitchen, right? Put your hair up. My hair's up. And you're going to want to wash your hands and clean up your space. So okay, so let's get started. Okay, so our knife, some of you who have done my classes have started off with one of these. This is what we call our safety knife. And just to remind you all, make sure that your hands are washed. You got your washed hands. If you're going to wear an apron, you have that on, ready to go. Your station's clean. So a safety knife is a good way to start because you're not going to be able to really cut yourself with it, and you can practice what it's like to hold a real chef knife. So this is the knife that I'll be using today. It's a good weight for me. You want to make sure that it matches what's comfortable in your hand. Every chef prefers a different weight and a different size knife, so this one really feels good for me. And when I'm not using it, I have it pointing away from me at the top of my station like that. So hopefully you're starting with a safety knife. You can get these on Amazon. They're really inexpensive. If you have trouble finding one, let me know. I can try and help you find one. So you're going to use, I'm right-handed, so I have my right hand, and I'm pinching on the back of the knife like this. So between my thumb and my pointer finger knuckle, right? It's going to pinch on the back of the blade like that, not on the handle. And then my fingers are wrapped around the handle like this. So it's a really strong extension to my arm. Okay? So some things that you want to pay attention to and stop yourself if you start to notice that you're doing it. You don't want to be holding the knife back here on the handle like this. That makes it really wobbly and a lot more difficult to handle, and you're more likely to cut yourself. Another thing that people typically do is they'll put their finger on the top like this. This is usually how you'll see people holding their knife, and that again is really unstable and causes not only your cuts to be uneven, you'll find that a lot of the cuts are wider on one side and thinner on the other because you have less control over it, but also you're going to be more apt to cut yourself because it's going to slip and you can go into your hand that way. You'll lose control. So you want to make sure that it's secure in your hand like this, okay? And then your cutting motion is going to be point down, rock up, and away from you. So this is really important to always make sure that your knife is moving away from you never being pulled towards you, because that is dangerous. Obviously, you can see what might happen if you're doing that. So always away from you, okay? So like this. So you can practice that a little bit before you actually start cutting something. And then your other hand, so again, we want to avoid having any medical emergencies, okay? So your other hand is going to curl in tight like this. All your fingertips are in tight, so nothing's poking out, okay? And that keeps it so that your knife can ride along your knuckles like that, and you're never going to cut anything underneath it. So oftentimes you'll see, if you watch cooking channels, you'll see the host looking up while they're cooking, they're cutting, and they're talking to you. They can do that because their knuckles are there to stop the knife and none of their fingers are sticking out. Otherwise that would turn into a horror show for you. So this is an easy way to do that. But well, for our purposes, we are going to always be looking at what it is that we're cutting, okay? Because that's the only way that you're going to get better, is through practice and paying attention, okay? So I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to move on to my knife, okay? So some things I want to demonstrate for you for knife safety before we go into actually starting to cook is when, again, like I said, eyes always on the knife. If your eyes are not on your knife in the kitchen, the knife is down, hands off, okay? And when you put it down, again, like I said, at the top of your workstation like that with the blade away from you, you never want to be putting it on an edge of a counter like this. Because you see how it hangs over? That's going to be easy to knock over, and then you have a sharp knife flying through the air and can really hurt somebody. So make sure that it's at the top like that. When you're carrying it to the sink to be washed, you want to make sure that you're carrying it down by your side, straight down, right? Never up in the air, never like this, straight out like that, because you never know who you're going to turn around and bump into, okay? And again, if you hear something, you don't turn around with the knife like that. You put the knife down and then turn to see what it is that you are hearing, okay? So those are some pretty basic knife safety rules that you can apply to your kitchen right now. If I'm forgetting anything, please comment and let everyone know what you think should be added to that, okay? So we want to make sure that we're all safe in the kitchen with our knives. Okay, so some different cuts. We're going to start with a basic slice because that's easy to practice as you're getting familiar with your knife. Okay, so I've got my tiger claw. I'm holding my knife, pinching it like this. I have a thank you for coming for my food scraps. Okay, so I don't need to peel this because I washed it really well, and a lot of the vitamins and nutrients from our vegetables are contained in the skin. So I want to obviously get as many nutrients as I can right now. So I'm leaving the skin intact, okay, but I washed it really, really well. Okay, so we are going to practice getting our cuts really even. So this is super important when we're cooking because we are going to roast these vegetables. And when you're cooking something, if some things are wider or bigger pieces than others, those bigger pieces aren't going to cook, right? They're going to still be hard or raw. And your smaller pieces, your really thin pieces, are going to actually burn. So you want to make sure that all your pieces are as even as you possibly can. This is really important in the culinary world, okay? Get the best dish that you can out of it. So I'm going to start slicing, and again, you want to start with the big piece that you're cutting in the hand of your tiger claw, the hand that's holding it, okay? You don't want to be working this way. You want to be working this way, okay? So this is a slice, see? They can be thin, they can be thick, it's all your preference. We're going to try and make them about this. This is about 1/4 inch, okay? That's the size that I want. You'll see this one, can you see that? How it's really thin on one side and not on the other? I'm going to show you how to correct that in a minute. But first let me slice this up. And you want to make sure that everything's out of your way when you're cutting. So if it starts to build up and get in your way, just push it aside, take your time. And you see how I'm going point down, going down and kind of up and away from me like that? Yeah. My pieces are kind of flying everywhere. When it starts to get too close to your hand, if you're not comfortable, stop. You don't need to get any closer, okay? If it doesn't feel safe to you, then don't do it, okay? So that's about where I feel safe enough, and I'm going to put that in my thank you for coming, which is my compost. All right, so I'm laying these out so I can see how I did. Lay them all on their side. And then I like to have chefs get down eye level and see if they're even, if your pieces are straight across and they're even on the top, or if they're wider or thinner on one side, and if they're all about the same width. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and check mine out. Okay, so, all right, so there's a few things that happen with mine. So I have a couple pieces that are thinner on one side than they are on the other, okay? And then I have this piece which ended up being a little thicker than the others. So that was just because I didn't place the knife properly and evenly when I was cutting along. The pieces that were uneven in their piece, that is because my knife wasn't straight up and down. So if you start to notice that your pieces aren't even, you know, one side's wider than the other, check out your wrist on your hand here and make sure that your knife is straight up and down and your wrist is straight. Because if you tilt it one way or the other, you're going to get an uneven cut, okay? So straight up and down, and it's easy to correct. If you start seeing that happen, then you just correct your wrist and keep on going, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead. These are slices, so if your recipe calls for slices, this is what you're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put those in my bowl. Okay. So our next cut that we're going to practice is a dice. Okay? So we all know what dice look like, right? They're square cubes that you roll when you're playing a game. Again, I'm not peeling my potato because I want those extra nutrients. So for a dice, now again, our slices are kind of on the thinner side. So I want to do a smaller dice to make sure, because this is all going to cook together and I want to make sure that it cooks pretty evenly. So to do your dice, you're going to start off doing slices. And again, there's no real wrong way to approach this. This is the way that I do it, okay? So I'm going to go at it from the long way, okay, because that means a little less slicing part for me. All right, so I'm going to do it a little bit wider than I did my carrot slices. And again, when you're doing this at home, you don't have to use the same vegetables as me. If you look at the recipe that I've uploaded, it calls for whatever vegetables you have on hand. And that's really important right now where we're having limited time at the grocery store. We want to use what we have available to us instead of making extra trips to the grocery store. So, okay, so we have our slices. Okay. And now we're going to take those slices and we're going to slice them again this way. And this is actually a cut called a julienne, which we're going to do with another vegetable too. But this is a julienne, so it's like a French fry, okay? And now I'm going to cut it again going the other way, and it's going to make the cubes, the dice. Okay, so here's a good one here. You see that? Okay. And I'm going to add those into my bowl, and I'm going to finish cutting up the rest of these. This is going to be really good. I hope you guys really try this. The roasted vegetables are delicious. My favorite way to have vegetables. And you can incorporate it, you can eat it plain as a side dish on its own. Or you can add it into pasta, you can add it into some rice. You can, I think because it's morning while I'm filming this, I think I'm going to add it into some eggs. I'm going to make a roasted veggie omelet. So whatever your imagination will allow is what you can do with it. And I do want to see you guys getting creative. If you do something really different with these vegetables after you make them, please share it with us. I want to know. I want to see what you're making. Okay. So we've got our dice, okay, and our slices, both in our bowl, okay. Now we're going to, well, I showed you the julienne. I'm also going to add a red pepper. I'm going to julienne the red pepper, which is a little bit different than the potato julienne. You saw that those needed to get sliced and then sliced again to get that. A pepper already kind of is in strips when you slice it, right? So I'm going to, when I cut into my pepper, I usually take a slice off like that so I can see inside. You see how there's all those seeds in there? Most people don't enjoy those, and sometimes the peppers, if they're a spicy pepper, that's where the really spiciness is going to be. So we want to maybe mitigate that. This is a sweet pepper, so I don't have that issue. But I'm going to cut around this part, which holds the seeds, and just take that right out so I don't have to deal with the seeds getting onto everything, okay? Okay, I'm going to put that in my thank you for coming. So when we're cutting, we always want to try and look for the flat side to keep it stable so that it's not moving on us. So for me, when I sliced off that pepper, now it has some like flat sides I can lay it down on. So that's a lot easier than on this side when it's really uneven and kind of round and it's going to move a lot on me. So always be looking for that flat side. Okay, now this is kind of an odd shape, you'll see. So my first cut or two might be a little weird, but that's okay. I want to maintain the same width of my strips, okay? So for this purpose, the peppers are going to be a little wider than our carrots because the peppers are softer than our carrots. So remember, that's another thing to take into consideration when you're combining different vegetables. The harder or the denser a vegetable is, likely the longer it's going to take to cook, and the softer the vegetable is, the faster it's going to cook. So you want to make sure that your softer vegetable is a little bit bigger than your hard vegetable, okay? But then my pepper strips all need to be the same so that they cook evenly, okay? So we've got our peppers. I'm going to cut this in half again, so it makes it a little easier to get around all the sides. Now again, this cut is our julienne. I've got some seeds on here that I missed before. All right. Okay, we got our peppers in there. Okay, so the last cut that we want to learn is very different than the other cuts. Okay, so we're actually even gonna hold the knife a little differently than I taught you before. A little bit. All right, so this cut is reserved for foods that have a really strong flavor. So right now I have garlic. Did you see me peeling that? So this is what our garlic looks like when it grows. And it has this papery outside to it. And inside there's a bunch of littler pieces like this. You peel them off and those are called cloves. So when your recipe calls for 1 clove of garlic, you're going to just take off one of these little pieces, okay? And you're going to take all of the papery bits off because those aren't something that you want in your recipe. You don't want the papery bits. But you do want the garlic. All right, so I've got a couple cloves of garlic. I'm going to scrape off my station, get all those seeds off there. Okay, so I've got my garlic clove. And so garlic has a very strong flavor. It's delicious, but if I were to just eat this like this, it might be a little overwhelming for me. And that's the same for things like jalapeno peppers, hot peppers, anything that has a really strong flavor, ginger root. You want to make sure that you're cutting it up really, really, really fine and having that flavor dispersed evenly throughout the recipe. And that cut is called mincing. So when you mince, you're still going to pinch the blade like this, okay? But instead of our wave cutting action, your knife is actually never going to leave the cutting board, okay? So it's going to stay on there. And your other hand, instead of your tiger claw, is actually going to go across the top of your knife with your fingers a little bit curled up. And it's going to help balance your knife as you rock back and forth over what it is that you're cutting. So before I start doing that, first I'm going to slice it, okay, to start it off getting some smaller pieces. And these don't have to be perfect because again, you're going to go over it and mince it. And then I like to do a rough dice with it. So again, turning it the other way and cutting it again. Okay, now I have smaller pieces, so it's going to take me a little less time to do the mincing piece. All right, so you want to start with it in a pile like this, okay? And pull up my sleeve a little so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I have it like this, and I'm going to just rock back and forth over this. You see how I'm moving my knife back and forth like this? And sometimes, see, it's stuck on my knife like that. I want to push it down. Sometimes it'll spread out across your cutting board, so you want to pull it all back in into a pile so that you're more efficient with your cutting. Just keep going back and forth like this until you get really, really, really fine pieces, okay? Because that's the flavor that's going to get all over rather than in big chunks, big mouthfuls. You see how small it's getting? Can you see that in there? Okay. And I'll just hold this up so you can see how fine those pieces are. And when they're all about the same size, when they're really tiny and pretty even, that's when you know you've done enough, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put our minced garlic in there. Okay. This recipe also calls for onion. So it calls for onion slices. So your onion, like the garlic, comes with that papery outside to it, okay? So you want to make sure that you cut that off. And as we all know, onions sometimes make you cry when you're cutting them. So a trick that I use with my students a lot, if you don't have those goggles that they have you wear sometimes, if your eyes start to burn, don't touch them, okay? Go to the sink and run your hands under cold water, and that alleviates that burning sensation in your eyes, okay? And then you can go back, start to cut again, go rinse your hands again. It'll be a little bit of a back and forth because a good onion is going to do that to you. All right, so the easiest way I know to peel the onion is to go ahead and cut off the top. So the top is going to have this little sprout thing. On the bottom is where you can see all those little, those are the roots of the onion where it was growing in the ground and pulling up all the nutrients. So the closer you get to this, the more it's going to make your eyes burn. So we're going to start at this side. We're going to cut off the top. And then it makes it easier to see where the outside ends. And you can kind of get in there and pull that off a little bit easier. Okay. This one doesn't want to let the skin come off. And sometimes you'll see that happens. It gets a little more difficult to peel. And if that happens, sometimes I'll tell students to go ahead and cut it and go back and take it off, which is, depending on the onion, that can be a little easier. But you just want to make sure that you get it all. Okay, just about done. A red onion would be really good in this too. So if you don't have white or yellow onions, you can use a red onion. That'll give it a little bit of a sweeter flavor. So see, my onion is completely peeled. And I want to slice it. So I'm going to go ahead. I got my tiger claw holding it like this. If you find that it's rolling around on you a lot, my philosophy is that it's better to feel safe in the kitchen than it is to have the most perfect cuts. So what you can do is go ahead and cut off a little bit of the bottom of one of the edges, and that'll give you a flat side to then hold the onion onto while you slice. So if you feel like it's rolling around and you can't get a good hold on it, that's absolutely an option for you. Okay, so we've got our onion slices. Those are going to go in. All right. I have a parsnip. I really love roasted parsnips, so I'm going to add that into it as well. And I think I'm going to slice this like I did the carrot. You know, again, you can choose how it is that you want to cut it. Parsnips, when they roast, get this unbelievably sweet flavor to them. So when you eat them raw, they can be rather bitter. But once they're roasted, they take on a wonderful sweetness, which is why it's one of my favorites. Now, if you have Brussels sprouts in your house, you can go ahead and do that too. What I would suggest for adding Brussels sprouts to it is to cut them into fourths. Okay. All right, so I've got my parsnip. Okay. Now it calls for fresh herbs to be added as well. So this is rosemary. If you don't have fresh herbs, go ahead and use whatever your favorite herbs are in your kitchen. So, you know, maybe an Italian seasoning, or you can get creative. You can add whatever it is that you like the flavor of. So I might add a little bit of this too. We'll see. Okay. So in order to cut this up, it's going to be just a lot of really fine slicing. The rosemary has a really thick stem in here, and I want to make sure that that doesn't get included. So we're only doing the leaves. So some of these, I might want to do it now. I'll take off the leaves down here and add them up here so that they're getting in that bundle. And I'll stop the cutting when I get to the stem. Some herbs like parsley and cilantro, they have a very fine stem, and those can be cut up and included as well. Okay, so there's my stem. I got all of my fresh herbs. You can see very fine. Again, we want the flavor to be evenly distributed too. So that's why we cut those up nice and little. Okay, so I've got my bowl with all of my vegetables and my herbs, and I'm going to add some olive oil to it. I think it calls for a tablespoon, so I was just eyeballing it. And I really like salt and pepper. If you don't have any herbs, salt and pepper does just fine. I think most of us probably have salt and pepper in our house. Okay, add that salt. Got my pepper. And then my herbs. Okay. So mix that up, make sure that all the vegetables are coated in that oil. Okay, this looks good. All right. Now we've got a baking sheet. Okay. I lined mine with tin foil just to make cleanup easier. You can go, if you have extra tin foil in the house, I would recommend doing that. It certainly makes it easier. All right. Okay. When you put it on the pan, you want to make sure that none of the vegetables are overlapping. You want to spread them out nice and even. If that means that you need a second pan, it's better to use a second pan than it is to have the vegetables overlapping, because they won't cook properly. And you'll end up with some that aren't cooked or some that are kind of soggy. They don't get as crispy. I think this is going to make a really good omelet. Okay, so we have them all spread out. I'm going to pop this in the oven. I have the oven at 400 degrees. I preheated it before we started cooking. And it's going to go in there for about 25 minutes. I'm going to check on it and flip it and see how much more time that we need. It might just be another 10 minutes after that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in, and I'll see you back in about 20 minutes. All right, I think they're ready. So let's go ahead and look in the oven and check it out and see if it's done. All right. So be careful when you're opening the oven. That heat's going to come right out. Make sure that you have something to protect you when you're taking it out of the oven. So I have my pot holders. Okay. So this looks perfect to the way I like it. Some of you I know like it a little crispier than this, so if that's the case, leave it in a little bit longer. I like mine to be a little bit crisp on the outside edges and softer on the inside. I don't like it to be too crispy all the way through. So again, this is all the way that you like it. And so keep practicing those knife skills. Post them up on our classroom or on social media, our Instagram, our Facebook. You can email them to me directly. I would love to see what you're doing and how you're using those knife skills. Remember to hold the knife properly and correct those who are in the kitchen with you. Show them the right way to do it. Keep them safe as well. All right, I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.